Hi guys, so today I'm planning out my garden. If you missed last week, I went through all my seeds and categorized them. If you want to go back and watch that, you can, or if you prefer to read, there's a blog post with all of the seeds that I have written down. So yeah, that's all the seeds I have. And now it's time to get a piece of paper and start planning. So first of all, I have 4 beds. So I'm just gonna trace those out very roughly. 2 of them are long. 1 of them is a little bit long, but not as long as the others. And then I have 1 teeny tiny short one. Stop. Wait. That is completely not the way to start. No, just don't play in your garden that way. Rewind.
Alright, so that was completely the worst way to start planting. Well, not the worst way, but it's not a good way to start planting a garden. Before you start actually planting, you really ought to get some basic information down. So, the first thing I'm going to do is see how big my beds actually are instead of just kind of having a general idea in my head about how much room I actually have. So I have 4 beds, 2 long ones, and 1 almost long one, and 1 short one. So I'm going to see how big they actually are compared to how big I feel like they are. And then I'll know how much space I have to actually plant things. Alright, so, I've been sick, that's why I look terrible. Side note, if you're sick, my opinion, it's okay to look like you've been sick. Don't worry about it. I've been sick. I've had pink eye and a cough, a really, really bad cough that's been keeping everybody else awake, and all kinds of mess. But I'm on the upside, and I've got gallons and gallons of lemon honey water, and I'll be fine, because, yeah. Just keep moving on. So, I talked about needing to gather some basic information. And I measured out my beds. So I have 2 beds that are roughly 19 feet by 3 feet wide. And then 1 that is 17 by 3 and 1 that is 6 by 3. So you don't have to do it with graph paper, but if you have graph paper, I think it makes it easier. So I have some graph paper, and basically I've drawn out the beds. The paths don't have to be accurately wide because you're not putting anything on them, except for maybe rocks or something. If you have rocks, that would be nice because weeds are terrible. But basically, mine fit into the space so that I could do each square is 6 by 6 inches. So a foot square is 2 by 2 or 4 squares. So the next thing you want to do is decide what you're going to grow. Now, if you already have seeds, then you just pick which ones you want to use. You might want to use all of them. You might have tons of seeds like me and not have room to use all of them. So yeah, pick what you want. If you're starting off, that's great. You can just buy what you need. And then you don't have to worry about extras. So decide what you want to plant and then do a little bit of research. So here, you can see it. There we go. That may look like a bit of a mess to you, but it's easier for me to follow along with than just lots of words. This is my companion planting chart. So if you don't know, the idea of companion planting is that certain plants grow well together and certain plants don't grow well together. Now sometimes, well, for one, you don't want to plant too many of the same thing in one spot because you end up with extra pest problems. Like, you don't want to put all your beans in one side of the garden because then you end up just with lots of bean beetles and other stuff that like to eat beans, and they're like, woohoo, it's a banquet, let's eat. So you want to mix things up as much as possible. Some plants complement each other really well as far as flavor goes. They put certain things into the soil that the other plant needs, and they help each other to produce a better flavor. Some things don't go good together. Like you should never plant beans or peas near any kind of garlic or onions because they stunt each other's growth. Certain herbs aren't good with certain plants because they affect the flavor. Anyway, there's lists and lists. So if you want to know about a certain kind of plant, just Google it, say companion plants for blah 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 plant, and they'll tell you what things are good to grow with it, what things are bad to grow with it. So I wrote down all the things that I think I'm planning to grow. And then I use different colored markers to highlight which things are good next to each other. So on my previous plan, which I don't think I have in here, I had it all set up really pretty. And then I read something that said you shouldn't plant cabbages near tomato plants, which I had a lot of cabbage and kale near tomato plants. I was like, I should just start over. I know the theory of companion planting. I know some big ones, but I always forget all the little stuff. So write it down so you know exactly what you have. So that's for me. I have all those and I have matched them up. I have measured my space. Gardening doesn't have to be a science. Some people make it a science. And it can be a science, like each plant needs exactly this much space and exactly this combination of soils and this and this and that. And, if you follow those, it's fine, but it's not really necessary, and it doesn't always work out exactly the way they say it will. And I kind of like to think of it like cooking. Some people have to follow a recipe. They're just not good at cooking. I am one of those people to some extent. Like sometimes I can just make stuff, but mostly I need at least a guideline to go off of. If I try and just create something, it usually comes out weird. Whereas my husband, he can just like open the fridge and grab a bunch of stuff and throw it all together, and it's delicious every time. My dad is very similar. He was a chef in the Air Force, and he can just throw it together. He doesn't know how much he has of anything. He just throws it together and it's good. So everybody's different. If you need more technical information, go ahead and get it. Some people just throw some seeds out there and work with what they get, and it's fine. I like to have an understanding of how things work so I can kind of facilitate something that works out a little bit better, but I'm not like huge on following exact guidelines. So with that said, I think, let's see, is there any other basic information you should get? So it's good to have a general idea of how much space plants need, if they need cross-pollination or if they're self-fertile, or if they need pollination at all. Like if you have cabbages and kale, unless you're planning on saving seed. You don't need them to be close to each other. In fact, it's better if they're not close to each other because of pest problems. So like kale, you could put it in random places around your garden. Some beans are self-fertile, some need cross-pollination. So it just depends. So it's good to know which plants need that and which ones don't. Which plants need some shade and which ones need to have full sun. Which ones are okay with some shade, but they're also okay with full sun. So those are important things to find out. I've read that as far as bees go, they prefer like large clusters of flowers. But as far as getting your garden pollinated, it is good to mix flowers and herbs in with your vegetables and fruits. Just beneficial as far as pollination goes. So with that information in mind, I am going to start tracing out my plans. And these are not set in stone plans. This is just an idea of what I want to do, so I know how many plants I need to start and when I need to start. So I have my list of all my different varieties. I have my list of plants that I want to grow. It's very bright, sorry. List of plants I want to grow and what their companions are. I have a pencil and a pen, and I have my graph paper, which you can see I already started filling in some stuff. So that being said, within your garden, if you have a full sun location, that's great, but some plants don't like full sun. So what you do is you plant in such a way that taller plants can create shade for plants that don't need as much sunlight. So for example, you could use a table trellis, which I'll quickly tell you what that is because there's not a whole lot of information on the internet about it. Basically what it is you make a trellis, but instead of going straight up and down, it looks like a table. So there's either posts on the side or two other kinds of trellises, some kind of rack on the sides with a essentially a rack, like something that plants can grow in and out of, like a trellis, on top. And the idea is that you use cucumbers or tomatoes, some kind of vining plant, and they can grow across the top of it. And the fruit hangs down through the lattice work or rack or whatever you're using. And they hang down through there, so they're not sitting on anything. They don't have problems with rot. And you are able to plant things that are more light sensitive and heat sensitive underneath of them. So like you can, I believe cucumbers and spinach go good together. So I will be planning on making a trellis for my cucumbers, and they will grow across the top of the trellis from one side. On the other side, I'll have like a wall trellis for my dwarf peas. They will get some shade from the cucumbers, so they will last longer into the summer. And then I can plant spinach underneath, and it will be shaded during the heat of the summer and hopefully last a little bit longer than it normally would with the summer temperatures. If you have tall trellises or even tall flowers like sunflowers or hollyhocks or corn, those make a great morning or afternoon shade for a little extra shade for your plants. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and get started.
Alright, so now that I have everything where I want it, I just wanted to kind of quickly go over it with you. This isn't an exact plan. I will probably change it, adjust it, add some things, take some things out, interplant some stuff, onions, flowers. It's just a general layout so I can figure out how many seeds I need to get started. Because I'm actually running a little bit late this year and I need to get started. I keep seeing people on Instagram with their seeds starting or their little baby tomato plants, and I'm just like, oh my goodness, I am so far behind. But it'll be fine. Last year I planted things, I think, a little bit too early, so it'll be fine. And I'm just going to quickly run through what I have, what my plans are. Some things are already there, like my garlic, this red enchilium that I saved from last year, and elephant garlic that I have planted in the middle of a bed. My plan is to plant cabbage on both sides. I'm going to interplant some chamomile, so hopefully those two strong smelling herbs will help protect the cabbage from pests. I'm also going to try making some row covers specifically for the cabbage because I really want to have cabbage this year. I have some very lightweight off-white material that should help to shade them as the summer gets hotter and also to keep the cabbage moth out. Kale isn't quite as bad because it's an open leaf plant and you can just see the worms and pick them out, but cabbage, it's kind of a ball and you can't see the inside, but the worms can crawl under the leaves and get into the heart of it. So I'm going to try covering my cabbages this year and hopefully it'll work. On this side I'm planning on doing cucamelons and possibly blue butterfly pea. Then I'm going to have some broccoli and some beets. They're supposed to be good next to each other. And some mother of pearl poppies tucked in there. There's already one in that spot. So hopefully I'll have a nice little patch there. Red potatoes over on this side, and then turnips and some bush beans and radishes. And some hoppy pale gray squash and some glass gem corn that I just got from a seed swap. Put some zinnias in, maybe a marigold on the corner. And I'll be planting some long beans on both sides, and they'll arch across the top. So it'll create kind of a tunnel. They're one of my favorites. They grow so well in our hot, humid summers. They're native to Southeast Asia, so it makes sense. And they're a very vigorous vine. They should cover it really, really nicely. On this side, I'm going to have some blue bread seed poppies and then a table trellis. On this side, I'll have the cucumbers on this side, and they'll grow up and across the top. Peas on the other side, spinach underneath, so that'll help keep it shaded. Hopefully I'll have some celery up there next to my peas. Also, the trellis will create some shade for things that need a little bit of extra shade, and they'll have some morning shade from that. And And I'll have some celery there and some tomatoes, which later in the summer I'll be planting carrots under there to help give them some shade, and then they'll develop during the fall. I'm going to stick some broccoli in there and maybe my Nigra hollyhock. Some green onions around the tomatoes, peppers, bell peppers, and some broccoli. Maybe some more beets, all my leafy greens, TP with some beans to help shade the lettuce. That'll be mostly loofly lettuce, arugula, mustard greens, pak choi, things like that. And then I'm going to have some okra and some lettuce, like head lettuce, planted in between those, and radishes on both sides. And on this side, I'm not sure exactly, probably some kind of beans on that side, maybe blohildi. And then I'll have pink popcorn with succotash beans growing in with it. They're dried bean. And then on the outsides, I'll have 2 Beni Kodimi watermelon. And it can grow in and around the corn to help create like a live mulch to, keep the moisture in for them. I forgot down here, I'm going to try planting some barlati beans. Not sure how the germination rate will be, but we're going to give it a shot. Those 2 beds were easy. This one, I felt like I was struggling a bit with how I wanted to fill it. So I'm going to do summer squash, 2 here. I have 3 different varieties that I want to use. That'll be Desi squash. Up here will be Cocazelli squash. And I'll just plant radishes around them, fast-growing radishes. And then some bush beans and tomatoes with other stuff, interplanted around them. Some peppers. Some kale. Some more beets, hopefully. And just things nicely interplanted. Ground cherries. And some more kale, maybe some verbena in the middle. It's a nice airy plant that doesn't shade out they don't create a whole lot of shade. They just kind of branch out over things. Some more peppers. I'm going to make a bean trellis going. It's going to arch over the garden bed. That way it doesn't have to be tall enough for me to walk under, but it creates some shade for things like Swiss chard and kale and other stuff that's a little bit more heat sensitive. I have 2 different varieties of green bean that I got in a seed swap, so I'll do one on each side and see which one I like best. I've also got some kohlrabi, some more bush beans. And then this bit is mostly winter squash. Acorn squash on the sides. It's a shorter, bushier plant. So I'll be planting radishes around the base. And maybe carrots, but mostly just radishes. Then in the center, I'm going to grow some slippery silk beans. This shape you see is 2 racks I have. They're like trifold. So I'm going to attach them in the middle and kind of bury them down a bit so they create a place for the winter squash to grow. So on the first side I'm going to put Kushal, and then up at the top I'll put some butternut squash. And in this middle piece I'm going to plant some slippery silk beans, which are also a dried bean, so I don't have to access them really. So if they grow in with the squash, that's fine. It's not a big deal. And probably throw maybe some random flowers in there as well. So that's about it. I do have a few other spots, and there will be nasturtiums and some marigolds and other things, herbs, chives, basil, other flowers and whatnot mixed in, kind of fill the space up as much as possible. So that's my basic garden plan. It's just, it doesn't need to be pretty. I've done pretty ones before, but usually it ends up getting changed, so I'm not going to waste my time trying to make it gorgeous this year. This year it's functional, and I'm happy with that. I'm trying to prioritize things and focus on the important stuff and not get carried away with the frivolity of making my plan as pretty as I want my garden to be. So that's done. Next week I'll be sharing with you how I get my seeds started. I'll be starting them today, but how I choose how many I need or how many I want and how I start them and how I grow them. Like, for example, the kale and the cabbage are hardier. I can start them and get them out sooner. And then some things like the celery just take longer, so they need to be started earlier. So if I'm just counting kale, I need at least 8 kale, and I'd like to have 4 of each of the varieties that I have. So 4 Red Russian and 4 Nero di Toscano. And the seeds are kind of old, so I'll have to allow for decreased germination rate. So I'll probably throw 6 of each seed in and see what I get. So that's how I do it. I'll just go through the whole thing and check each kind of plant and start the ones that need to be started sooner. Some things like cucumbers, well, those you can start indoors a bit. But things like squash and cucumbers or your root vegetables really just have to be directly planted when it's time for them to grow. Same with beans and peas. Yeah. So some flowers need more time to develop depending on your growing season. But I'll talk about all of that next week, I suppose. All right. I think that's it. Check out companion planting. The more mixed up things are, the healthier it is for your plants, the less likely you are to have problems with pests. As a side note, I don't use any chemical pesticides. I do occasionally use store brand type fertilizers because I just can't afford to buy that much compost. And it's difficult to find good compost around here. So I do what I can, and I try to make it as natural as possible. I'm trying worm castings this year. I'm probably also going to buy some blood meal and bone meal. Any excess potting soil I have, I like to mix in. And any compost I have, I'll mix in some wood chips on top. And ground cherries are something that do excellent in crappy dirt. So you don't want to waste your resources on a plant like that, but you might want to add some extra to something like beets that needs a little bit extra nutrients to grow fat, happy roots. So that's all for this week, and I'll see you guys next time.